Hello, everyone. My name is Pianpian. I'm the founder and CEO of Amotions. Today, we're speaking with Elena Mikhailov, global human capital leader and leadership coach. We're going to talk about first building relationships in remote settings, because right now, most people are still working from home remotely if they are working in some kind of used to be working in some kind of office capacity. So yeah, I would like to start the conversation by asking, how's it going for you, Elena, working remotely from home, and what are the learnings so far?
Certainly, certainly. Um, I think for me personally, it works well, simply because I don't know. I feel like I have always worked with global companies and I've always worked with remote employees, even though they weren't really remote locally, they were remote for me, or I was remote for them rather. So this isn't really something new for me. So yeah, I think that having an optionality of a flexible work environment where I can, go into the office, or I can, take my calls from home and work from home, it's actually quite beneficial. So for me, this wasn't really a huge change, to be perfectly honest. But I do know for folks who have been used to really going in every day, working with their coworkers, and that's been, like for whom it's been like a really primary group of people that they have interacted with, I think it's probably a little challenging, or it has been a little challenging over the past year and a half to really manage those relationships and maintain them or build new ones. I mean, companies are still hiring or now hiring. Like I'm sure a lot of companies have had freezes in 2020. Now we're kind of in the hiring boom, and so you probably have a lot of new hires, a lot of new coworkers, a lot of new teammates that are not located in the immediate location. And so building relationships with those people is going to be, key to your success, within your company or within whatever it is that you're doing, right? Whether it's, if you're entrepreneur or whether you are actually, on a team, then then I think it would be um, essential to focus on building those relationships.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Emotion started in February this year as full time, and we're working remotely, and all my team members are remote. So, and we also have two new team members started remotely. We haven't met in person, but we have been kind of making use of all the tools that we can and building relationships over the internet. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that's just really kind of the way of the future. I think at this point, we will have access to a lot more resources, right? And relationships are always essential and really um, getting the job well done and feeling satisfied, right? So, if you read any of the Gallup surveys, right, or Gallup reports, I think that there's a direct link of one's commitment to the company and the relationship one builds within the team. So I would say that if you're really thinking about, building a successful company, you do really need to focus on building those relationships, whether it's with your employees or your peers, uh, or your, direct subordinates. So I think that's what's really going to bring you success.
What are the best practices have you learned from various companies and settings?
Sure. The first thing, if you want to build relationships, you really have to be a clear communicator, right? So there's, and at this point, I think I've read a number of articles on this, right? And have seen this in practice, right? If you don't communicate clearly and almost at this point over communicate, I think the message doesn't really register as well. So it looks like you also have to communicate on several channels. Like, for example, if you're holding maybe an all hands meeting, right? Maybe this is the time where you send some information ahead of time, allowing your employees to read through that so that when they're actually in that all hands meeting, they're actually listening to you right? Versus trying to read the slides or trying to catch up, right? So you want to be communicating with your people in multiple channels. Like, or for example, if you're holding a meeting with your peers, maybe you send out the agenda ahead of time. So they have ample time to prepare and know what to expect. Then you communicate after the meeting with a summary of what was discussed, right? So there's clarity beforehand, but also clarity afterwards, so that it settles in, a little bit more. Because think about it this way, right? What if you are in an office setting? Let's just say something was said. You said, oh, well, you know what, maybe I missed something, but I'm going to go ask my coworker. My coworker's just right here, so we can discuss this. There's an informal conversation. And so this information kind of settled in, right? But in a remote setting, not as much. I mean, even if, let's say, you're using Slack or any other, instant message communication channel, right? It still is really not quite the same. It's not an immediate reaction where you can really go in and have a really, good discussion. So over communicating sometimes and providing a lot of clarity, offering a lot of opportunities for Q&A, I think is one thing that you should absolutely start with. But of course, before you communicate anything, you have to be really clear about what it is that you're communicating, right? So I think that, my personal advice is to, spend some time and see how clear you are on first, whatever it is that you're communicating. Are you clear on the direction that you're proposing? Are you clear on how it's being communicated? Are you clear on your people's sort of reception channels, right? Do you know who's an auditory, person, or who does it visually? Like, how do people absorb information? How do they learn, right? So just make sure that you are taking into consideration, like, how does your team communicate and what is the best way to relay that information, and how clear are you with that direction? Because the last thing you want to be doing is providing focus, but then changing focus, but then changing it again because you changed your mind or something. And I mean, I think it's okay to be agile. I think that you should be agile. I mean, directions change. We're in a very dynamic environment, but think about it as clearly as you possibly can.
Right. I think that applies to both work and maybe personal setting as well. It's like,
of course,
be clear what you, clear about what you want, and kind of the main message before you talk to other people. And we have found it, I mean, of course, we're using tools like Zoom and Google Hangout, etc., and Slack, all the tools that we can get for both writing and video, audio communications. And besides kind of preparing in advance, like, what else have you found useful for meetings, etc.?
Absolutely. I mean, I know this is going to sound silly, but start with small talk. I mean, people want to get to know you personally, right? People, it's not all business. I mean, yeah, you can absolutely have business relationships, but they're business, they're not personal. And ultimately, how you're going to get the needle moving, right, is when you actually build the personal relationships. And small talk, right, before it was more of like a simple conversation starter. Here, share something personal. I mean, for example, for my new hires now, I actually asked them to share something, a fun fact, right? And do this not just in a small setting of a stand up, but do this also like on a global setting, right? So we're not just announcing who's joining the company. It's the name and the title and location and the picture, right? But we're also talking about like what makes them tick, like what's cool about them, so that people can later on then follow up and say, hey, I'm into this too. This sounds really like an awesome idea. Add a personal element of whatever it is you're doing. I mean, ask people how their day was, right? And don't just ask to kind of, check marks like, oh, how are you? And they say something like, oh, fine, how are you? Ask them like, what'd you do for fun? Like, how has it been for you? Like, what's happening, right? And find something positive to relate to, right? So I think in this day and age, it's really easy to commiserate, right, on something. Find something negative and focus on that, because that's just the easiest point of connection. But instead, I urge you to find something positive and accentuate on that. What positive thing has happened? Like, ask about, instead of what challenges they're experiencing, say, so how have you overcome those challenges? Like, if you've had anything, like, please share some of your insights. Right? People really like to help other people. I mean, in general, I think that's just, I think we're all good human beings by nature. So we like to do something positive. Ask them for an advice, ask, hey, I've come across this situation. Like, any ideas, like, what can I do, like, how can I improve this, right? I think that, ask them about something positive. What do they do for fun? Like, what was exciting, like, what was invigorating? So what happens at that point, two things actually, right? You're getting to know them personally, but you're also raising an energy level on which you're communicating, right? So you're raising that sort of perception channel by raising the energy level. The higher the energy level, of course, meaning the vibration, right? The easier it is for you to communicate and reach consensus. So if you're starting with a small talk actually has a very positive notion now. So, like, I would say, don't skip that.
Maybe
There's
sometimes
more, but one at a time.
Maybe sometimes there's a better word than small talks. I totally agree with some of the non-work kind of topics. It could
Start
just
with a
mean that,
yeah.
something does not work. It could be deeper. It could be just how things going. Because right now with people, everyone working from home, including ourselves, like family and work is blended in some way. So yeah, there's always going on with home as well. And I was wondering, like, okay, well, if people don't have time to do like video meetings all the time, like what are the ways that we can convey that kind of building the connections and community in an asynchronous way, like via emails or messages, etc.
Emails, messages, connect on important things. Also, let's just say, like, for example, you are in San Francisco, well, let's just assume, right? And everybody is remote working. Maybe maybe you're not really back to the office, so you're kind of in the same vicinity. I mean, why not grab lunch with somebody? I mean, like, California is open for business. Other states are open for business. I mean, grab lunch with somebody. I mean, you can absolutely, keep the social distancing and, have some precautions in place, certainly. But I mean, nobody's stopping you from going for a walk with somebody, right? Like, walk and talk, maybe coffee or something else, just a quick, getting out of the house, getting fresh air, but at the same time also meeting somebody personally, right? And you can discuss something that's, maybe work related, but you also may want to just ask, how's their day? I mean, like, why not do that? I think, making a priority and actually meeting with somebody, I think, is going to be, certainly playing a huge role. Let's just say, okay, well, maybe you're in San Francisco, but your colleagues are in New York. I mean, Zoom can be exhausting. Being on video constantly is exhausting, right? Pick up the phone. I mean, like, I know people have forgotten how to, like, dial the number, but call them. But I mean, obviously ask them if that's okay, for you to, just quickly chat. Call them. I mean, like, Zoom doesn't have to be on all the time. You can just, do a quick call and say, hey, I just want to see, how are you doing? Something that one of my execs does, and I absolutely love it. Every morning, and he does it with, several people. I don't think he's doing it with everybody in the company. He's doing it with several people that he usually works with. He drops us a note and say, hey, how's your day? I'm really hoping that your day is going to go really well. I mean, like, wow. I mean, somebody cares about my day. That's amazing, right? It's so simple. Somebody's just wishing you a good day, right? Or asking you, hey, how's your day? Like, at the end of the day, it's just on Slack. It's not a big deal. I mean, it's 2 seconds of his life, but it's the 2 seconds that made my day. You know what I mean? And the thing is, if you return the favor to somebody, and if you raise the energy and the lightness of another being, then, work will seem and feel a lot more engaged, right? When you're engaged with the people that surround you, it always feels like there's a better connection there, right? And once there's a better connection, there's a better productivity, there's a better communication, there's, how a personal relationship is built.
Yeah, I think it's a great point about kind of raising energy level for both ourselves and other people, because um, a lot of time human beings are attracted by high energy
Mhm.
surroundings and happy surroundings.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
And we're talking about high vibration, not high energy as like somebody's hyper and just, feeling agitated, right? So we're talking about high vibrational energy here, right, Pianpian?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right. And I mean, there's quite a bit of discussion recently on kind of reducing stress and all those. Um, I personally have found it helpful to just do like a quick run, sprint in the morning around here. Curious, like, what other ways have you found it useful for yourself to
To
have?
raise my energy.
Yeah.
Um, so um, so I have a journal where I record all the positive things that have happened to me throughout the day,
Hmm.
right? Just little things that you notice, just a quick record. You know what I mean? Like it's a thing, right? I mean, I like to note what happened that was positive, and of course, where the focus goes, energy flows, right? So of course, I focus on the positive, so it goes into the positive. I try to think about people, the beginning of the day that I'm going to be interacting with, and remembering the positive things about them. I mean, not all of the conversations that I have are easy. I mean, being in the human capital profession for a very long time, I mean, I'm sure you can only imagine, right? So I get a lot of complaints, a lot of feedback from people. But if I were to go into that conversation feeling negative, the conversation would only go south. The whole point is that you're able to actively listen to your people, and being able to turn their energy right into, or their being, their vibration into a positive. So after talking to you, they feel confident, they feel productive, they feel inspired, and they feel like they can be moving forward. But for me, the day starts, with imagining the people I'm going to be interacting with in a positive light, and imagining them, or remembering rather, them, from a positive perspective. What have they done well? Like, what was my positive interaction? And this is exactly where my positivity journal really helps, right? It's the kind of a thing, right, where I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this. Like, I wrote this down. So like, it didn't just come and pass. I recorded it, and by writing it down, my brain obviously absorbs that, records it. It's a lot easier to come back to it and remember it later on, as something that's a positive event that happened, right? And heck, if I need to, I mean, I just look at my positivity journal, right? I know and I'm sure that, and I hear this quite a bit. It's like, well, there's kind of a bit of a stigma still with keeping journals. Although a lot of people do this, I mean, I think that I do find that some a little bit more pragmatic folks don't really like doing that, right? But I think for me, this has actually made quite a difference. It's helped me really focus on the positives in my life, and come into my audience, with positive vibration and excitement.
Yeah, that's great. I think the positive journal is related to the gratefulness journal.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that, but it's a bit of a twist. So I do the positivity notes as I go along. I do like to write down what am I grateful for, usually at the end of the day, kind of just
Hmm.
summarizing all the positive things so I don't forget them. Right. So when you're looking at the whole experience, it's the gratitude journal that you write down, I'm grateful for X, Y, and Z. But with the little things, I actually have like little notes, like this, where I just jot down what went right, like what was really great, so and then I keep them. So they're kind of my like flashcards in a way. But yeah, that's what I do. I think walking is absolutely helpful. I mean, obviously you want to raise your general energy. I mean, get enough sleep. I mean, get good nutrition. I mean, and go for exercise. I know this is something that, I mean, it sounds very obvious. Everybody knows it, but hardly anybody really practices it. So I certainly would want for you to all to re-explore the benefits of it, right? So, but going into these things with mindfulness, right, versus like I was just taking up time, right? If you're actually within your body, within your mind and your soul, so to speak, right, your emotions, right? If you're within your in alignment internally, I think these exercises are a lot more pleasurable, right? Because you're actually having a whole body experience from that.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And kind of applying these to building relationship, I think is super helpful.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're coming in with a positive intent, right, I think the relationship is bound for success, right? And so of course, this is where, of course, empathy comes into play, right? And as your ability to perceive the other person's story in a way, right, is kind of the way I see empathy, right? It's a state of mind, right, where you're able to relate to one's general experience in life, right? Is something that will help you with this relationship building. I mean, ultimately, in order to experience empathy and truly experience empathy, you kind of have to be very centered within yourself. And this is where mindfulness comes in. I think, though, empathy and mindfulness kind of go hand in hand, honestly. I don't think you can have one without the other, really. I think, honestly, empathy is really kind of a result of mindfulness.
Right. Yeah. I think, yeah, like when we are centered, there's always more.
When we're centered, we're able to see a lot more, because when we're centered and we're not scattered in various external reactors for us, and we're able to see and perceive a lot more than if we weren't.
Right. Yeah. And I think we were
We derailed
discussing
a little bit.
Yeah, we were discussing another topic that is repairing relationships, because sometimes in remote settings or even in person, it's easy for us to get into an argument or rub other people in the wrong way when we're tired and etc. So yeah, would like to hear if you have any thoughts on like what are the things to consider when a relationship needs to be repaired.
Certainly. So before you start jumping into repairing the relationship, ask yourself exactly what went wrong, right? Is taking stock as in how did this relationship fall apart, and why do you want to repair this relationship? Why is this relationship important? I mean, it's a work relationship. Obviously, you need to be productive, both of you, whether it's a personal relationship. I mean, understand your why for this repair, because some relationships can't be repaired, right? And that's okay too, right? There's some differences where you just have to let things go, right? Understand from which standpoint you're coming from, right? If you're coming from a self from a centered self, right, then your repairing of the relationship is coming from the right sort of avenue, right? If you really want to be like repairing the relationship because you really value this person, you value this relationship, and you really want this to work, versus you're feeling, I don't know, ousted. Maybe you feel like you are no longer part of something, and therefore you have to be repairing this relationship. So it comes from a lower level sort of energetic vibration, right? It comes from a little bit of a feeling like a victim, right? Ask yourself, I mean, I know it sounds really harsh, but are you feeling like a victim? Why do you need to repair this relationship? And what's important about that? So once you figure this out, right, and you decide that this is actually something you're coming at it from a position of strength, right? You're, your core, what you want, and so you want to continue to build this relationship, or you want to repair this relationship. And so ask yourself, what happened? Like, what caused you to, what causes the relationship to go astray? Like, why did you guys have an issue? Why was there a breakup? Why was there a situation that caused sort of a fracture in that, right? And by that, I also mean, don't look at what the other person did to you, because that's already, that's a given. So what the other person did to you is actually, I mean, you can look at it, and you should, but from a perspective of a trigger, because that is your trigger. And understand, when you ask yourself, okay, so what happened here, right? You identify the trigger, and then you apply this trigger and see how that impacted your thought process and how it impacted your emotions and reactions. So you're looking at it from a perspective of, so and so is so annoying and did this and that, right? And I just can't deal with this person. The key word is that you cannot deal with this person. I can't. Like, I am. This is your reaction, right? So when I say I can't, blah blah blah, right? It's just understand that this is ownership of your perception of what happened. So taking stock of that and understanding your triggers, so you can then properly address this with the other person, right? So for example, I have a pet peeve with punctuality. It's a thing for me, right? It's just how it is. Like, I like to be on time, delivering, right? And when people are a little bit more relaxed with their timelines, right, it just drives me insane. So there's been ample times when I have been just mad at a person, but the thing is, the one thing kind of led to the other, and then it was just a negative perception of the person. The only thing is just the other person had his or her own story for why this was their routine, or why this was their habit, right? And I wasn't willing to look at it that way. I was just looking at it as I was being wronged, because now I was sitting here and waiting for this person. But if I were to take this out, right, and address this as a trigger to me, and say, okay, well, you know what, this actually upsets me. This is how I see it, and I would like to set the right expectations for this person, right? I think it helps quite a bit understanding what was that thing for me that started this whole process, right? Why did I get irritated, or something else went south for me, right? So the same thing with the other person, right? Everybody has a story, just like you, right? Just like me, just like everybody else listening to us right now. We all have a story for our behavior, how we have developed into who we are, right? Empathy part is actually understanding that storyline, right? So understanding, like, not just looking at it at a person in time that they're late. You have to understand exactly why they're late, what may be happening for them. Maybe it's a new mom, right, that's trying to finagle her kids, right? Or maybe it's a really busy executive whose employees require constant attention, or who is in constant communication with the board executives, whoever, right? His team or her team, right? So you kind of have to look at it in big picture. And then once you see that factor, I think that it's important to address it. And I think you should absolutely take ownership in your part of the conflict. This what conflicts happened. It's not, one-sided. You obviously have reacted as well. It's not like you've just been wronged and that's it. I mean, there was something there as well. Apologize for your part. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, take ownership of your part in this break in the relationship, and say, hey, this relationship is super important for me. So I want to find a way for us to work things out. Is this possible? Ask another person for permission. I mean, I think that, from that perspective, it would be important to acknowledge the other person, right? You are asking, instead of forcing this relationship on somebody, you're telling them, you're acknowledging, your situation, what got you there, right? You're expressing, an interest in building the relationship, but you're also asking for permission. And so this allows for this person to be seen, right? You're asking them if that's okay, if they're interested. And I mean, they said yes, great. They bought into it, and you're off to the races to, figure out how to work this relationship. But if they said no, it's okay, right? You have to own and respect, that answer, and respect the other person. And it's not a reflection on you. It is, that person's, personal situation in this point in time. And it's okay if they're not able to move forward. And I think you respecting this person inadvertently will help them mend the relationship eventually, if that's important to you. But if the person said yes, I mean, and you get the communication going, asking like, what actually happened there? Like, what was the experience for you like? You know what I mean? Like, be really curious about the other person's point of view. Like, where were they? What brought them to that? And then express your point of view. So you're not constantly bending over backwards and feeling like, now again, like a victim, you've done everything and they haven't done anything for you. Here's your opportunity to actually share what is important to you, right? Express, hey, when this happens, or, this is how I feel, or this is how it's impacting my day. Would that be okay if we came up to a common ground, because at that point you're allowing for the other person to see you, right? You're being seen at the same time, right? You feel like you are communicating your truth, right? And then you're setting expectations, right? It's just as important to set expectations as setting boundaries. So you say, okay, this is what I would like to happen, right? So, and then ask, what can I do to help you with this, right? Like, just, don't put a hard, say, well, this or else, right? You say, okay, well, this is important for me. How can I help you to get adjusted to how we can accommodate each other, right? And I mean, I think that will help the other person really to open up, right? And see you as somebody who's truly invested in this, right? And see how they can help you remedy the situation, right? So I think these are kind of really the initial things. But one other thing that I would say, once you've decided on this, be consistent, right? It's the consistency in behavior that builds trust. And when the relationship is on the damaged end, it's most likely lacking trust. And so what does need to happen is trust does need to be reestablished. It's like trust in whether somebody is competent, trust whether somebody is able to deliver, trust in you being able to be there for the other person is what you do need to repair. Let me just make sure I'm not forgetting something here. Oh, another one big thing. So yes, so all of that, what I said, but also, how I talked about the positivity things, like the positive little things that I do. Even though you want to repair the relationship and you have already started making the first steps, I think what would really help to sustain the continuity of that, right, and the consistency of that is you focusing on the positives, because it would be super easy to slip back into the negatives, right? It would be super easy to be like, next time this, he or she does something wrong, it will be just easy for you to write it off and slip right back to where you were, because that emotional anchor is already in place, because this event already happened, you've already been feeling this, right? So changing that up, right, is something that you would have to do consciously. So this means that you would most likely have to sit down and view the other person in a different light, which means that you will most likely have to sit there and think about what positive things have happened with this person, what positive progress that has been made. So this will help you, again, elevate your energetic level with this person and the sort of the energetic wavelengths, that you will be communicating with this person. On the receiving end, he or she, right, will absorb that, right? The other person will absorb that and will, almost magically inadvertently will really start making this, kind of almost a copying effect, right? Even though, they may not be well versed in this, positivity journal or whatever, right? The thing is that they will be mimicking your projected energy level. So if you go in a conversation with a positive outlook, it's a lot easier to uh, get the other person to reflect that back on you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. So I think I heard a few kind of key steps and points here. One is to understand like our own triggers, why we got upset in a meeting or relationship. And then second part is to figure out like, okay, is the trust broken? How do we reestablish the trust? And that might need some consistent delivery of actions or promise or certain things for that trust to be built up again. And then lastly, kind of we look at something with a positive view and light, and including both the situation and the other person, because there's something good in every person. So how do we remember the positive things when we're in a moment when we might be focusing on the negatives?
Yeah.
And then there's actually a phrase in Chinese from the 5,000 years of wisdom, treat other people the way that we want to be treated. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
if we start
Go on. Sorry.
no, I said if we start more focusing on the positive side, it might take time, but um, things might change over the time. Yeah.
And I mean, the first thing, like I said, is understand why you want to repair this relationship. Because ultimately, if you understand your why and your motive is pure and clear to you, right? It's a lot easier to think about all these positive things. It's a lot easier to come into a relationship with pure intent. And it's a lot easier to be authentic. And that's certainly, read from the other side significantly better if you would have been just trying to force it, right, or push it, right? And always be respectful. And one big reminder, so relationships are not a one-way street, right? It's a two-way street. It's like a tango. Every relationship is a tango, right? So understand, or a dance. I mean, I don't know, maybe not a tango, but the point is it's a dance in pair, right? When there's one, there's the other, right? It's not one-sided, right? So relationship, you have to nurture and develop, but if the other side is not willing to be there, it's okay, and it's not a reflection on you, as I mentioned that, right? I think it's also very important to understand it's not a reflection on you being a bad person, or it's a decision by the other person that needs to be respected, right? And I think that goes a long way. I mean, I've had situations where I've seen people just not willing to have any kind of reconciliation happen, right? Like they were not willing to reconcile. That was it, right? And one party was kind of feeling a little guilty, right, and wanted to, salvage their relationship. I mean, it didn't really come from the pure intent. The other person just did not want to even engage. I mean, they felt so wronged by the other person. But when they said no, and the other person acknowledged that and said, what, I understand, and I respect that, and if you're ever ready, I'm here for you, right? Or I'm here with you and we can come to the table and discuss this. I mean, years passed and now these people are best friends. So I'm just saying, like, that's just what happened, right? Like things turn around. So if it's a no today, it doesn't mean a no indefinitely, but even though if it's a no indefinitely, accepting that is a skill.
Yeah, I think you make some really good points. And what we discussed could apply in work settings, but also in personal settings,
Absolutely.
romantic relationships, and
Yeah,
etc.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Those two were coworkers. Now they're obviously doing different things. One is entrepreneur and the other one is an exec, but they're quite honestly like really great friends. I mean, I feel like it's great. It's funny because I was, chatting with them a couple weeks ago. It was maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. They just brought up this exact situation. They're like, well, you were playing, the joke was that I was playing the referee there. And I wasn't really, I was trying to mediate the conversation, but we've had this conversation before we got into that sort of mediation process where, I mean, I had to basically coach a person to say, hey, you know what, you're just gonna have to accept, what the other person says, right? And go with that, right? And it all worked out, but yeah.
Wow. That's a great story to hear that. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Yeah. We really appreciate that you spent time talking to us today.
Of course. It's always
Yeah.
a pleasure.
Yeah. And hope to see you all in more emotions discussions and on the platform. Thank you.
Thank you.